Diagnostics. Today I'm going to be going over how to grade Barber quarters and tips and tricks on how to more accurately view them. So first off, like the Barber dime in the previous video, the AG coins have blending of the rim with the lettering on the reverse and the stars and overall design on the obverse. If you don't see any parts of the ear or the eye, this section, that's typically when you get to the fair, and typically all the rims are completely ground down, and in pour one, you're going to see barely the date, and the reverse is almost completely gone. You're only going to see like the center of this. So when you get into good, this is where the rims are all there. They're a bit weak. They're not very high distance from the actual fields of the coin, but it's definitely all there. There's really no other things you can see on the headdress, and the eagle is almost completely worn. Things to look out for are any parts of the Liberty. You will not see anything in the good. And on the eagle, there's no eye. You can hardly tell there's even feathers on the neck, and there's hardly any differentiation in the tail feathers. So in the VG is when you're going to start seeing the letters pop up in the headdress, the ribbon right here. Typically an L or an I is all you're going to see, and a very good 8 typically has all the detail in a circulated coin, if that makes any sense. You're not going to have the very minute details, but overall you're going to know what the coin actually has on it. With the fine coin, typically what I look for is the Liberty on the ribbon. With fine coins, I like to be able to tell that all the letters are there, and you can see all the letters, but they're not fully formed, and you can't tell where the ribbon ends and the hair begins. In F15, this is a fine 12. In fine 15, you're going to see usually all the letters fully formed, but the blending between the actual ribbon and the hair is still there. On this particular example, you can see a minor rim ding above trust, and overall there's quite a lot of hard nicks. These aren't something you would get from circulation necessarily. A lot of these could be from damage, but because it's so worn, and most of these marks are worn with it, they happened as it was a higher grade and were worn down too. This isn't going to net it details grade. And on the reverse, you can tell that there's starting to be some definition in the outer wings. The tail feathers are starting to become fully formed, and just the tiniest bit of the shield here is starting to become visible. And VF coins, I like to see the ribbon fully formed, so you can see you kind of get that separation in between Liberty and the hair. The eye is fully formed, the ear is fully formed, you can see into the crevice, and you can start to see a bit of the, I'm not sure what you call these, the stars, the different lines in the stars. And on the reverse, you're going to have full E pluribus unum, and sometimes the strike can be really weak, but on Barber quarters, that's hardly ever a problem. And the tail feathers are all there. wing feathers are all there. This is typically VF20 is when you see the basics of all the design elements visible, but they're still extremely worn. Now, on the Barber dimes, I did not go over VF30, but I thought it was important on quarters just because there is a lot larger coin and it wears much differently. And you can tell that this coin has a lot more cuts as well. Again, same thing, it's worn with the coin, so it won't net a details grade. The rim is completely there. This is a well-struck example, and you can see the denticles are fully formed on both sides. And there's a lot of feathers you can see right here on the neck, and a lot of feathers overall. And another thing to see is the shield has pretty much every stripe visible. This is a really nice coin. On the obverse, if you were just grading the obverse, you might have thought this was going to be in an AU50 holder. It has a lot of luster left. It's hard to tell because it's a picture, but usually when you see color like that, typically it means that there's a lot of luster beneath that, and that's what's protecting it. A lot of times, like this coin, Barber quarters, Barber halves, were all stored in White Raymond or envelopes. So you're going to see a lot of that really nice album toning on these circulated examples that you don't typically see in any other except early Mercury dimes. Barber quarters in general did not circulate as much as Barber halves or dimes, and the mintages are a lot lower. A lot of these are less than $1 million, and it's probably more expensive to collect Barber quarters than Barber dimes and Barber halves. But what stops this from being an AU50 is the reverse. You can see there's quite a lot of wear that really stops it from grading higher, but a lot of luster in the lettering, and overall this is when you're going to see, if you're going from AU50 to EF45, EF45 to EF40 is when you see the last bit of luster, but this particular example is very nice. I could not for the life of me find an AU50, so this is an AU53. AU53 Barber quarters are a bit different than most of the others. On gold, AU53 is quite a disgusting grade, to be honest. It's got a lot of hairlines, and sometimes it's because of old cleaning. This also has an old cleaning. That's where the color comes from when it's circulated like this. The lettering here, this is mostly from something that had been cleaned and retoned over time, but worn enough that it won't warrant details grade. You can see all the stars are fully formed, and you can really tell that this is worn. There's a lot of wear on AU53s. You can see the discoloration along the profile of Barber's Liberty. But if you take a look at the eagle, even AU50 has a bit more wear, but AU53 and up, you're going to see really a fully formed of every single device, but just a tad bit of discoloration. Here's a really nice AU55. Or sorry, this is a 58. This is a 58. At first glance, this might look like it's uncirculated. There's not a whole lot of discoloration. But if you look at the high points right here, on top of the cap, hair, and along the eagle's wings, you're going to see just a tad bit of discoloration. So, like the Barber dimes, AU58 is typically, when I say at first glance, this is like an MS64, MS63, but unfortunately there is wear, so obviously it has to be a 58. Now, Barber quarters are also notorious for being graded 58 plus on very high-end ones that have some cabinet friction. This is unlike some of the other coins in the coin series where they'll just go MS60 or AU58. 58 plus is beginning to be more common in other denominations and designs, but Barber quarters were really the first to get that bump. Now, on uncirculated Barber quarters, rather, they have quite a weird luster pattern. Probably the most notorious luster pivot points are on Morgans, right in the center of the cheek, and on Mercury dimes. If you look at the reverse, when you twirl it, there's going to be a line in the reverse. If this was a Mercury dime, right along this direction, where it's kind of bold. And on Barber quarters, you don't see it that much on the reverse. It's a pretty flat design. It doesn't have that bowl luster on the later issues. And on the obverse, you're going to see there's some luster patterns. So the next two photos are the ones that I can really cement what the luster looks like in hand. You can see this isn't toning right here. That's actually how the luster works. You can see same thing over here. And really the luster pivots are lines rather than entire sections or single points. Right here on the cheek, down. It's very odd, and it's something that throws a lot of people, including me, off sometimes. So that's something to look for in Barber quarters, especially when it comes to higher end, because a lot of Barber quarters don't have a lot of nicks and bag marks like Morgan dollars and other later denominations, even Barber halves have. Mostly it's just rub from stacking them, but not jumbling them around. So you're going to see a lot of wisp and not a lot of huge contact marks. And if you don't have that luster in those specific pivot points, you're not going to be able to get above a 64. So this is a MS62. You can tell, the Barber dimes, this is a cleaned example, over-dipped, however you want to say it, that has retoned. It doesn't have anywhere, but it's really, really unattractive. The luster is all wrong, the color is wrong, and it's just an ugly coin. There's not a whole lot of hits, but what you want to see in a 62 is that this is an ugly, cleaned coin, or over-dipped rather, that just has the dumbest toning you've ever seen. Now once you get into MS63 territory, you're not going to see any over-dipping, particularly. On this example, it looks like it maybe was dipped once and retoned, but it's certainly not over-dipped. The color is correct. There's a few spots on this coin, right here, and right here, but you can tell from the face that this looks like a Morgan dollar in MS63. Particularly, this is a pretty bad example, but I wanted to cement what exactly the wispiness of the contact marks looked like. This is a really nice MS64. You can see the color from the album toning. This has a pretty weak strike overall. Some of the neck feathers are beginning to blend. And on the obverse, while there's no major hits in the fields along the face, there's some pretty deep contact marks that prevents it from a 5, even though the luster on this thing is probably exquisite. This is a really nice MS65. There's really no hits. The luster on this, you can tell, is just great in hand. You can tell from this type of coloration and overall how the light reflects along the borders of the portrait. You can tell that this really has a lot of luster. That's typically what you want to see in a photo, at least. But on the reverse, this is a really weak strike. For an 1892 first year, this should be very, very bold. Even here on the leg, the arrows are starting to blend together. That's really what keeps me from a 6. Typically, a 6 Barber quarter has everything you could want, and you typically don't see anything above that. See, this is the 66. This has a really original haze to it. You might find the toning unattractive, but this was probably put in a velvet case and not even rubbed at all. This is typically like you would see on a proof, seated or Barber quarter. And great strike, no hits that you can see, but it doesn't have that wow factor that you typically see in a 7. And overall, the toning isn't as nice. So overall, you really want to pay attention for the pivot points in the higher uncirculated grades. Luster is super, super important. Strike is super important on the Barber quarters. And if you ever need to tell in between the aware and strike, that must be the only one. See, on this last one, this is starting to develop a fin along the edge. This happens when the dies are enclosed. They're spaced just enough so that they probably would contact each other if there was no coin. But this is what you would see on proofs as well, the fin, the little wire rim, and that's notorious for an extremely nice strike. So if you see a fin on a coin, but it has wear, this is all blended, this is sort of blended, this is blended, that's not going to be a strike issue, that's going to be a wear issue. So if you enjoyed the video, please like and comment. That really helps a lot. And consider subscribing if you have not. So hope you enjoy your day.